Hey there everybody, it's Caitlin, your geeky girlfriend. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, this is your spot for all the things. We've got book reviews, movie reviews, travel vlogs, and tours, and things to do, and shopping, and all of the things, all right here. And just a quick little announcement before we get into today's video. I am going to be adding some different content to this channel. Some TV show stuff, and maybe some video game stuff coming soon, or board game stuff, definitely. So it's going to be a lot more geeky stuff being dropped here. But today's video is going to be a book review, a Bookie Babe book review. My most recent book, which was book number 21. I think I made an error in my last video, and I have since also listened to an audiobook, so my Goodreads is kind of off because I'm not counting the audiobook towards my books for the year, but it still counts towards Goodreads, if that makes sense. And I will be doing a review of the audiobook, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about my most recent physical book, and it's Fourth Wing. I did get this book from the library, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and before we get into the video, as always, I'm going to give my little spiel. If you are new here and you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you check out all of the other book reviews. And like I said, this is book number 21, as far as I know. Like I said, my Goodreads is a little bit off. This might only be book 20 because I'm not counting the audiobook. But either way, we're at 20 or 21. We're in July now, and I only have 4 more books to meet my goal, which is super exciting for me, and I love that for myself. Now, let's talk about this book in particular. This was a book club book. We're meeting to discuss the book here in a couple of weeks, so I finished it early, but I have another book for my other book club to read, so that's what we're reading right now. But I was not excited to read this book, because I'm not a fantasy person. The genre of this is adult romantasy, so it is some romance with some fantasy mixed in. And before I even started reading it, I was told that it was sort of like The Hunger Games meets Harry Potter. So think of all the things that we have in Harry Potter. We have dragons, we have magic, we have this school of witchcraft and wizardry. We have all of those things in this book, plus the gauntlet and war game style battling that happens in the Hunger Games where people die and, like, it's just sort of part of what happens there. And the story is set in I am not even going to try and pronounce, like, some of the names and stuff for you guys because I feel like everybody will read this and probably give it a different pronunciation, but the story follows Violet, who is a first-year student. She's being voluntold into the Writers' Quadrant. So there are different, like, schools at the college. So similarly to a college, you know, a real-life college, you have your school of education, your school of business, your school of fashion, whatever. And in the war college, they have the writers, the scribes, the healers, the menders, the infantry. So, like, they have all these different schools, and Violet has grown up her whole life with a scribe as a father and a war general as a mother, and she has trained herself for the scribe quadrant. She is told that that's where she's gonna go because it's safe, and she's petite, she's frail, all these things, but her mom tells her, no, you're going into the Writers' Quadrant because both her brother and her sister were writers. Her brother was a mender, and then, her brother was a mender, but still went through the college, and then her sister was an actual writer. And so, anyway, her mom's like, no, you're going in the Writers' Quadrant. And everybody keeps telling her, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, because she's so frail, and she doesn't have strength, and all these things. And so, like, her whole storyline is built upon this, like, perseverance, tenacity, like, showing, like, proving people wrong, essentially, is Violet's whole main character trait, okay? So, she goes through and she keeps passing these obstacles. I won't go into the details because, as you know, here on the YouTube channel, I like to just keep it very basic and very like surface level, and just kind of say like, if you like these things, read this book. If you don't type of a thing. So I'm not going to go too far into the plot details, but I will try and identify some of the tropes for you in this video. But so she keeps being told that she's going to die. Keep yourself safe. Oh, and she is given the opportunity several times to get out of the Writer's Quadrant and like go back to the Scribe Quadrant, which she refuses. She doesn't go. And for various reasons, which you'll read about in the book. And by now, most of you watching this video have probably already read this book. This is, like, it's not a brand new release. There is a sequel already, Iron Flame, and this is, like, one of the main book talk reads, right? So this book has circulated a lot of publicity, circulated a lot of internet fandom and things, which is another reason why I wasn't super excited to read it, because I don't like to read things that are super popular. I like to wait a little bit, let it die down, and then kind of enjoy it on my own right, because in the event that I don't enjoy it, then it's like, well, everybody else loves this book. And I kind of wanted to have that experience. Like with this one especially, I wanted to be like, oh no, I didn't like it. And I can't say that I had that experience, so I went in with low expectations, possibly a negative or pessimistic outlook, like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna like this, it's just not my genre, I didn't even read Harry Potter. I know that's terrible of me, but I didn't. I read the first one and couldn't make it through any of the other ones. Actually, that's incorrect. I read the first 2 Harry Potter books, and then I tried to read the third one, and I couldn't get through it, and then I picked up the 6th one and couldn't get through that one either. So anyway, so I was like, I'm not gonna like this. And this, I will say that the fantasy parts of this book I didn't love. I still like can't really dive in or connect with the genre. Like when they were talking, like if there was no dialogue happening on the page and they were just talking about history of the college or lore or battles that had happened like way, generations before the story, I kind of was just skimming over that. If there weren't dragons on the page, then I was kind of skimming over it. And Violet is a very strong character. Don't get me wrong. She's very easy to kind of attach to. You want to root for her. And it's kind of hard not to root for her when you know, especially me, like I knew that there was a sequel, so I knew that short of a complete perspective change halfway through, Violet most likely doesn't die. So, as readers, we can use tools to kind of deduce that things are not going to happen. So I kind of knew that Violet wasn't going to die, but like that doesn't mean that there aren't some close calls. But the thing that propelled me most in the story was the romance element. So it is a romantasy, which means it's a fantasy story with a romance undertone. So some people would probably consider this a romance novel with fantasy undertones. I say it's the opposite. I think it's a fantasy story. It's a fantasy setting with this romantic storyline underneath and kind of propelling the characters along. So there is a little bit of a love triangle. We do sort of have a Twilight sort of esque team. Are you team Dane or are you team Xaden? And if you've read this book, you can let me know in the comments which one you are, because I am team Xaden all the way, and Xaden is, in the beginning of the book, even on the back, it mentions Xaden, him being the rebel son and the kind of the enemy. So again, using our readers' tools and our comprehension strategies that I teach students all the time, you can kind of deduce that Xaden's going to be a pretty big character one way or the other. But then we also have the ex-friend or the best friend that now, as Violet grows and changes, they kind of separate, and I feel like people could still be on Team Dane as well. But I don't see how that's possible. But anyway, you're just going to have to read it to find out. So the romance aspect of it is what propelled me. Like the dialogue between Violet and Xaden, the dialogue between Dane and Xaden, and Violet and Dane, and her friends are pretty likable as well, like Liam and Rhiannon. They're all very likable characters. And you, like I said, you do kind of form some strong attachments to some of these characters. And I read it way quicker than I was expecting, but it did have a slow start. It took me about 100 to 150 pages to really like get into it and want to read it. So for that reason, I gave it a 4.5 on Goodreads. And that and the fact that I just really like could have cared less about any of the fantasy elements, and I just wanted more of like the romance storyline and sort of like the adult dialogue and all of that. Like I wanted more of that, and now more dragons. I would have been fine with more dragons, but I could have cared less about the Basgiath, whatever, the history and all that. And I just feel like I will fill in the blanks as I go. Like if I'm reading the sequel and I can't remember something because it was like, oh, I probably skimmed over that part. Oh well. Oh well. It's kind of my philosophy. And note that this is an adult novel. This is not intended for young adult readers. The language is very adult. The sexual language is very adult. And there are 2 explicit sex scenes with more implicit, just using words, not really dialogue throughout. And then there are some like very sensual scenes as well. And that was what really got me interested, was this tension that was palpable through the writing. And so that was very good. But overall, my friend and I looked it up, and it would be considered a 1 spice. So if you are like if you read a lot of smutty romance and like really steamy romance, this is going to be very, very mild. And even for me, it was very, very mild. Verity, if you have read Verity, is considered a 3 and is more intense than this one. So like if you've read Verity and are nervous about the romance in this one, if Verity was too much for you, then this is exactly what you need. If Verity was fine for you, then this will be okay, but it's not really gonna maybe satisfy your thirst or your need for like really sensual scenes. But it does have a few in there. It does have that spice, but more so the language in it, and just like the goriness of it. Like they talk in like pretty graphic detail about people getting beheaded and stuff like that. So there's a lot of gore. I would say like late high school, like 16, 17-year-olds, probably fine to handle this. But again, as an adult reader, and if you're trying to decide if your children should read it or if you would be okay with your children reading it, just pick it up and read it for yourself and make that decision. My husband and I discussed it. I read him a couple of the scenes, and we said 16 or 17 we would be okay with. And then obviously over 18 is a-okay, but younger than that would be a little bit much for us as prospective parents. So I just like to give you guys kind of that insight. For those of you who are already parents or trying to be parents or just wanting to educate yourself and inform yourself on the media, I am anti-book banning. I have talked about this before on this channel. I don't think that books should be banned, but I do feel like the parents have a right to say what their kids should and should not read and what they think is okay. And if my daughter came to me and said, hey mom, I want to read this book, and I didn't know what it was, or I hadn't watched a review, or I hadn't read a review, I would just pick it up and read it myself first. But I wouldn't necessarily say like, no, you can't read that. I would just say like, let me, do a little bit of research first. And I think that's okay. And as a parent, that's your job. That is your job to decide. That's for nobody else to decide, but it's not for society to say that these books are bad, because books should not be banned. Literacy should not be banned, especially not in our country. So that's a whole different topic for a different time. However, overall, I gave it a 4.5 just because if there would have been more romance and less fantasy, it might have gotten up to the 5. That's not to say that the romance scenes were not well written. They weren't very sensual. Like I said, the tension was palpable just off the page, which was great. It was really great writing. I am intrigued to read the sequel. I am going to read it. I'm not necessarily going to read it right away. There is going to be a 3rd book. It's not to be released until 2025, possibly midsummer, late in 2025. So I probably won't read the sequel anytime soon until right before the 3rd one is getting ready to come out. Then it'll be a way to refresh my mind on the characters and kind of reinsert myself into this storyline before the 3rd one. I don't know. Other people might know. I don't know if there are going to be more after the 3rd one. But obviously, when this one was written, she knew she was going to write a sequel because of the way it ends. So this one does have a cliffhanger. And overall, is it worth the hype? I would say yes. I get the hype. I understand why it has become such a phenomenon. And it was good. I didn't want to like it, but I did. So is Fourth Wing worth the hype? I would say yes. I would say I'm not gonna go out and read it again. Like, I have friends who have read it twice, going on 3 times. I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I wouldn't write it off as, like, a bad book. I would say it was a good book. But it also still did not meet that 5-star criteria, still did not make it into, like, is it one of the best books that I've read this year? Yes. Is it one of my top 10 of all time? Questionable. It didn't even get a 5-star rating. But I've read a lot of 2 and 3-star books this year, so overall, looking at the 20-some books that I've read, it is in the top 5 for this year. But so, like, I get the hype, but I'm not like, oh my gosh, yes, totally diving into this realm of fantasy literature. So that's my review on Fourth Wing. It was a good book. I'm taking it back to the library today, so I wanted to jump on and do the review for you guys, but let me know in the comments, number 1, are you Team Dane or are you Team Xaden if you've read the book? Number 2, no spoilers, but did the sequel live up to your expectations? Because I've heard not great things about the sequel already, and I've heard mixed reviews. I've heard that the sequel was really good, and I've heard the sequel was not great and that people didn't like it, so that makes me a little bit nervous, but let me know in the comments. Let me know, for you, did it live up to the hype, and what book do you want me to read next? Let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video. See you later!